Mama's been hurting, 'cause Daddy's been down. Ain't nobody been working since the mill left town. They got two youngins not 10 years old, with $200 left in his billfold. And a week's worth of groceries is the price of gold when your whole damn country's been bought and sold. Never there's been hard times, it's always made hard folks who could get her to the other side and not let it be all she wrote. I'd love to live to be an old man, but God, you can take me a young one. Just don't let the land I love die so young. Of thee I sing, I've been flying low in my troubled mind. Get to digging me a hole my soul can't climb. It's the end of the world, but nobody knows, as they all just stare at the trash on their phones in a land that's littered with many men's bones who died fighting for somewhere they could call home. Whenever there's been hard times, it's always made hard folks who could get her to the other side and not let it be all she wrote. I'd love to live to be an old man, but God, you can take me a young one. Just don't let the land I love die so young. Of thee I sing,
flying high, you know how I feel. Sun in the sky, you know how I feel. Breeze drifting on by, you know how I feel. It's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new life for me, yeah.
What is going on, Hive? Today is Thursday, June 19th. I hope everybody is having a wonderful week. It's Friday Eve. I am pre-recording this live because I am out of town, so I will be in the chat while I do that live premiere thing. I've never done one before, so hopefully this works. But what I thought I would do tonight is go through things that just don't make any sense when it comes to the Idaho 4 case. Now, this chat and the Hive is very familiar with the majority of these things. But if you're a new viewer, or if you are just now waking up to the fact that the mainstream news lies to you and doesn't have your best interest in mind, this will be a good stream for you. And so I've noticed a change in the amount of people that are beginning to wake up to this case and how nothing makes sense. We have one of Brian's friends speaking out and in his mind telling it exactly how it is. I showed that video or those videos on the stream the other night, and he wasn't afraid to call out certain creators who are guilters, as he labeled them. Those people have no idea who Brian is. They've never met him. And then he also gave credit to a handful of creators that were doing what he thought was good work. People that weren't assuming and believing everything that the news says is awful about Brian Kohberger. Now, this is probably one of those statements, or I guess that statement I just made is probably one of those statements where I should clarify. Obviously, if Brian Kohberger committed this heinous crime, I don't want him to get away with it. I don't think anybody would want him to get away with it. And then justice would be served and the court will do its job. But when it feels like an individual is getting railroaded, he's got absolutely no help or support in the mainstream media. His friend, whose video I showed, to my knowledge, it's like the first person that really came out swinging and telling people like, this is BS. You guys got to stop it. So, right. Let's all get on the same page here. Nobody wants Brian to get away with it if he actually did it. But it seems a little sus. And what we want is the right person to be held accountable. So that's what tonight's stream is going to be about. As a reminder, I am on Discord. Shout out to Dawn from the Hive. She's gotten that up and running. There is a good amount of people that have joined it thus far. And the conversations, I'm always getting notifications for it. So I'm glad that the Hive is treating it like the 24/7 headquarters for off-stream digs and conversations, not just pertaining to the Idaho 4, but about anything. Also, we got some new merch that is available on birdiebombshell.com. So we've had this. I went ahead and I launched 2 t-shirts. This says Hive Mind, unplug to see the truth. And then this shirt, I don't have any text on it, but I titled it that NPCs hate this shirt. And it's the bird, given the bird, kind of similar to down here, but it's just a little bit smaller. It's a t-shirt. So now we have some t-shirts and not just hoodies. We got phone cases. We got the tinfoil hat, bumper stickers, mugs, traveler mugs. So go on over to birdiebombshell.com and check those out if you are interested. So let's just get right into it, right? The first thing first is that there is still yet to be what I would call a real motive identified as for why Brian Kohberger would have committed these crimes. I've said this, and I don't want to say that I've joked about this because this is nothing to joke about, but I referenced the Dateline opening scene of their most recent episode that they put out about the terrible night on King Road. And they have Keith asking one of the ex roommates' mother, why do you think he did this? And her reasoning was because they're beautiful. Okay. Right away, when I heard that, my mind said, this is not about to be an investigative episode by any means. This is going to be pushing the same old narrative that we have heard, that Brian Koberger is a loner who got jealous that he didn't get attention from any of these girls. So he decided to go and commit a quadruple homicide. I just feel like without that narrative, there is no motive. Okay. The prosecution can't just decide to skip the motive and hope that nobody would notice. Okay. There's nothing that Brian Koberger would gain from this. There's no financial incentive. There's no revenge incentive. There is nothing. And if you're going to say it's because he was lonely or because they were beautiful, whatever it is, and then reference the Ted Bundy thing, you guys, sometimes people want to say that some of the stuff we talk about on this stream is a stretch. Well, I think that motive sounds like a stretch, to put it bluntly. I don't think that any human being goes and kills 4 people for no reason. Okay. The state may argue you don't need a motive. Let's just skip the entire plot and all the events that may or may not have happened leading up to that night. Let's just call it a day. You know, the guy was probably mad about life. It's amazing insight, isn't it? You really had to think hard to come up with that one. And sometimes people kill people without an explanation. Yes. And sometimes prosecutors indict people without evidence. Starting back from the beginning. Okay. There is no murder weapon found. They found a sheath, but no knife. Your whole case is pretty much being held together with what I think the last version of the DNA that they found on the sheath was like mitochondrial DNA. But either way, it's trace DNA. I had an attorney on my stream, a week and a half ago, Allie Benevento. She's a defense attorney, trial lawyer. She told a story about just how unreliable trace DNA can be, and just the name of touch DNA, what that does to a juror's psyche. When a juror hears the word touch DNA, they think you must have touched it. And if what you touched is at the scene, you must have been there. And she explained it with a story that is just mind-blowing that this happened, but it gives such a great perspective as to, again, how unreliable what she calls trace DNA, what we call touch DNA, really is. And she told a story about a homeless gentleman that had a drinking problem that was passed out outside of a liquor store, and an EMT worker came and put the pulse ox on his finger. That same EMT, about 2 hours later, got a call to a rich IT businessman residence where the guy was dead. They put the same pulse ox on his finger when they were doing the investigation for how the IT guy was killed. Guess whose DNA they found under his fingernails from the pulse ox that the homeless man had used on him 2 hours prior by the same EMS person. That homeless gentleman was convicted of murder, and he's now exonerated. He's out. But, you know, humans shed up to, I believe, 500 million skin cells a day on average. And to think that Brian Koberger had owned this sheath for months, and they have to send it to 2 different labs and whatever, you guys get the point. So, I mean, is there really even a physical tie to this act or this weapon? I don't know. I think they've got nothing. I think if Brian Koberger did this, he's a forensic ninja. And I'm trying to think of what the state may argue other than, well, he threw it away, or he threw it away somewhere, I guess. You could totally convict somebody without a weapon. So it's just like the weapon exists. It's probably somewhere, but we're just going to do faith-based prosecution. You guys believe us. You guys trust us, right? And it just is insane. Now, this this one is so mind-boggling to me for a couple of reasons. The first is when they, meaning LE, put out that they were looking for a white Elantra that they had seen on surveillance cameras around the scene of the crime at the time frame that they think this all went down. They mentioned there was like over 20,000 white Elantras. Okay. What's crazy is that in that big of a school of Elantras that you're going to have to dig through, this is the photo that they released, or that got put into the media and ran with for quite some time before they used stock photos, which had the years wrong. You could see someone's cell phone in it. It's grainy as hell. I don't understand how whoever took this photo, they clearly, law enforcement would have had the actual like screen recording of it. Why wouldn't they screen grab it or clip it and release that? Instead, this photo is still used to this day in media outlets, and it's just ridiculous. I especially too with the FBI involved and all of the resources that Moscow PD and the university and everybody allegedly had, that this is what they have. So that never made sense from the jump. You're going to blame him based on a car model that's seen everywhere. The blurry footage makes it look like every Elantra ever made. So I don't get it. But even if that was Brian Koberger driving by, does that really mean that he murdered them? Suspicion is not evidence, everybody. I'll say that again. Suspicion is not evidence. It's an emotion. It's not a conviction. Okay? That's one of, if people could just look at it through that lens, meaning this case, I don't think there would be any doubt in the majority of people's minds that he didn't do this. Now, the other thing too is you're telling me that after a quadruple homicide bloodbath, there's not one speck of blood in that car. Because remember, they said that was the car leaving the scene. They just showed us it. They told us they were looking for it. At that point, that shit should be considered a magic trick. Excuse my language. That's not a crime. At that point, it's impressive almost, because how is that even possible? You could say, oh, he changed clothes, he did this. Okay, still, and I'll get into the Jason Bourne timeline here in a second, but I mean, they found nothing in the car. No blood, no transfer, no DNA, nothing. That's not clean. That should be, you're cleared in a way, right? They say that they see your car at the scene. They search your car. They find nothing. I feel like they've cleared other folks that have just as much suspicion, actually more suspicion. You're actually seeing their faces. You're seeing their actual person, you're seeing a person at the scene, near the scene, you hear their voices way more than Brian Koberger. They get cleared right away. So, I mean, to say that he must have scrubbed every DNA molecule is wild. And so this one, I just also with his father in the car and how Dateline had that one guy on there saying, well, his father was starting to get suspicious as he was driving. Like, my son drives a white car. My son, yada, yada, yada. It's like, really, really just crazy. We've talked about this one at lengths. The delayed 911 call is bizarre. I have said this before. These are college-aged adults. They are not children. We have had 19-year-olds win the Medal of Honor in this country, everybody. And if you took the PCA at face value, I still would be concerned as to why you're walking past your roommate on the ground. And I still very just confused on if 4 people are being brutally unalived, you hear it, you hear a ruckus, you hear something. Don't tell me you think that it was just somebody playing with their dog. I think I'm even getting to the point where it's like the speculation aspect of the delay, it needs to be figured out. Like, it can't just be speculated on anymore. You can't say that it was just because you were scared and you were frozen in fear and yada, yada, yada. The Linda Lane footage shows you showing back up at the house, allegedly in the morning, maybe carrying Murphy. Who knows? That's a different rabbit hole. But, traumatized witnesses, they don't just follow perfect timelines because panic is not linear. People freeze, people fumble, people hesitate. That's human. Okay. So it's not suspicious, but let's not allow a shock factor to incriminate the wrong person and allow a giant window in the timeline gap to cause all of this speculation so that whatever narrative needs to be framed by the prosecution can be done to make Brian look more guilty. I'm trying to not let my brain go down all these rabbit holes about like that 911 call. It was coached. It was fake. It was, who knows what it was. It wasn't normal. Okay. So I don't get it. I don't get it. So I feel like that 911 call has been talked about enough where, yeah, it's weird. That's extremely suspicious. I'm going to go back to that because you see the killer, you hear a ruckus, he doesn't touch you. You had allegedly invited one of the roommates back that got killed that evening. You wait 8 hours to call 911. Your statement changes. And so moving on. In addition to that, ever since Brian Koberger's been arrested, there has been no confession. There's been no slip up. He's not bragging. That's not guilt when people do that. I think that that's innocence, or it's unbelievable restraint to not say anything at this point because you're about to go get put into a murder room that the state of Idaho is allegedly building for the firing squad, where they just press a button and you're in a room and then it shoots you. It's like literal Hunger Games, Squid Games type of shit. And to have that pressure and not admit guilt, to get that off the table, to me means that person probably knows they're innocent and they're not going to take a deal because of the pressure. And the criminology argument of Brian Koberger knowing how all this works, maybe. I mean, criminology isn't necessarily the study of law. It's how criminals think. Like criminal justice is the study of the system. Criminology is the study of how criminals think, as we all know. So I just don't know if a juror would believe that a novice criminal, first time homicidal maniac, stays completely airtight for months. The fact too, the state may argue, well, it's weird he hasn't talked. Okay, so silence is guilt now, or is that really just your right to plead the fifth and not say anything? And I do not believe that only a guilty person stays quiet. I think maybe somebody who is terrified of what they say and how it could be used against them in a situation like this would probably stay quiet. The gag orders, you look at this screen right here, everybody. I mean, this is just a recent screenshot. This is from June 9th through the 16th. Order sealing, order sealing, order sealing, motion to seal, motion to seal, motion to seal, order sealing, motion to seal, motion to seal, so on and so forth. This case has so many gag orders and so many sealed documents. To me, and the research that I've done and the live digs that we've done on this stream, I've said this for so long, that does not seem like a straightforward college town homicide. That seems like something bigger is going on, a parallel investigation, as we know we've had our suspicions of. But again, if it was so straightforward, they got the murderer's car on camera, they got his DNA on the sheath, they have an eyewitness who puts him at the scene, he was stalking the girls, he killed them because they're beautiful. You think we'd see all this if that was really what went down? No, I don't think we would. The defense being denied full discovery for months. One of the most eye-opening and shocking things that I can remember off the top of my head happening in this case is when Ann Taylor couldn't get the chain of custody from Othram Labs and from when it left the FBI as far as DNA evidence. And then when they do get it back, it is doubled in size. So the whole DNA, IgG stuff, to sum that up, I believe the feds used a legal loophole to get a quote-unquote suspect's DNA without a warrant. Well, why would they need to do that? Well, they didn't have probable cause to go and get a warrant. And why didn't they have probable cause? Well, maybe they didn't have enough evidence. So, again, that just doesn't make sense. But there's also DNA recovered from 3 unidentified individuals under the fingernails of Maddie, yet there's no other suspects or co-conspirators unless Brian Koberger's defense team proves the alternate suspect, which is so unusual and so uncommon, if not the first time that it is happening pre-trial in America. Maybe, don't quote me on that, but I remember like when that all went down, they have to prove who else did it. It's like, whoa, hang on. No. We're not in Nazi Germany. We are in America. And it's the state's job to prove that this person who's on trial did it. The reason why we have trials in this country and why you're judged by a jury of your peers is because law enforcement can get it wrong purposefully or accidentally. Mistakes can be made. And so you have a chance to go and plead your case, obviously. But it's on the defense to prove that the person on trial didn't do it. The defense is not designed or meant to or has ever had to go out and say, no, this person did it. Here's why. I can see how in this case, hopefully it doesn't become codified and made law, but I can see how in this case that might happen, where it might become a regular thing. As we know, in these high profile emotional cases, there's always some sort of law or code that gets used for the first time to capture a monster or to make an example of somebody that they say will just be this one-time thing, and people can emotionally palate it because they're thinking emotionally, not understanding that their rights as an American are being overstepped and overreached And people say, well, if it's just going to be this one time to get that person, then fine, do it. As if then they'll never use it again. Well, we know that that doesn't happen. But the fact that there's 3 other individuals, unidentified individuals under Maddie's fingernails, and that's not raising way more red flags than it is, not just in the courtroom, but also just in the media. Silence from the media on that. The house being torn down prior to a trial date being set. I've talked about how the entire process of how the university had allegedly come into ownership of that house, they bypassed all of the normal proceedings that you would need to tear a house down. And the wildest thing is that the jury doesn't get to see the crime scene. They're using a 3D model dollhouse or whatever the hell they're going to do. Not just would, I don't know if the jury would have gotten bust out there. I would have guessed, I would have said it's like 70-30. Yes, they would have. They could have heard how rickety and creaky that old house is, how thin the walls are. Does the timeline make sense? Does where Dylan alleged that she saw Brian line up visually? And being there in person would probably provide the most accurate visualization of that, seeing it in person. And the fact that they tore that down before a trial date was even set is wild to me. Maybe the evidence inside of that house, or maybe the way that they said that everything happened, would have been exposed if they left it up and the jury did get to go see it. Maybe they would have went back and looked for more evidence too. I mean, there's crimes and cases decades later, people go back to the scene and they'll find evidence, and they'll put together maybe a different route of what the perpetrator could have taken to get away with it. And you can piece things together after the fact, especially after time has passed when more information comes out. Goes along with all of the other weird things is this slide, and that's that there is tons of other activity near the crime scene that evening. Just like the 3 unidentified DNA, or the DNA of 3 unidentified individuals under Maddie's nail. Any of these gentlemen here that have been seen on the Banfield right around when all this is going down. Everybody in this case has gotten cleared so quickly, it almost seems like it's by design. I've gone into this footage on my stream at lengths. I know so many other people have too. It's going to be really hard to convince me that between what happened on the Banfield, the rumors about the Greek life at that school, the 4chan and the Reddit posts, how can we just say that that's nothing really been seriously looked into? And I'm sure there's going to be people like, well, you don't know. The FBI, I'm sure they did. It's like, okay, don't you find it weird that it seems like nothing that anybody has discovered that's weird or that's an oddity now after the fact, while this is still going on, outside of the initial tip line that they said that they've looked into everything about? I've heard no updates about this. The 4chan threads, the Reddit threads, the rumors about the Greek life, they just like stop. How would somebody fabricate the timelines? Why would somebody talk mad shit about the victims after it? Like, none of it ever came to fruition of being something. And my question is, how? Who would say that otherwise? How could you fabricate that? Yes, it's an anonymous forum, but how? Why? Who? So I don't get that. And then you're left here with a Jason Bourne timeline with minimal evidence left behind. In my opinion, based on everything that we just went through, I would be shocked if there is not at least half of the jury that is not convinced he did not do this. Beyond a reasonable doubt, the things that I just said too are touched on in the most minimal way. I did this as a overview just to reflect on. There are so many rabbit holes that you can go down on the slides that I just showed. To think that the state has an airtight case, if you took out the news and the media narrative, which there's about to be another Amazon documentary or docuseries put up about this after they just had the Dateline one. I don't understand how the media would, why or how would they be leaking all this in a Supreme Court death penalty case unless there is some sort of collaboration between the state and these giant media organizations. And you might think that's far-fetched. Look at the old Twitter files. Look at all the shit that happened with that. If they could do it at that scale, they could do it on this scale. And my suspicion is that the reason why these media organizations are leaking it is because the state is allowing them to. What's in it for the media agencies is they will get millions and millions of views and make a bunch of money while risking the case, but yet the state can then fall back on and say, well, the media leaked it. That's why our trial, or that's why our case fell apart. And then they're going to say, well, who was the source of the leaks from the state? Well, if it was SG and if it ends up being a victim's parent, you know what's going to happen? No one's going to call it out. They're just going to let it fall off the face of the earth. Everybody's going to remember it as there was media leaks, and that's why it didn't go the way the state thought. They had a for sure conviction, and the leaks messed it up. To me, that's what I would guess is happening. I could be way wrong on it, but that's where my brain goes. And so, anyways, Hive, like I said, this is my first time doing a pre-recorded kind of premiere live stream thing. So I hope you all enjoyed that. I will be back on Sunday evening with the Hive Mind Roundtable. I'm super excited about that. I announced that on the 17th, so Tuesday. Or did I announce that on Wednesday? Either way, I'm excited for Sunday night. We got some great people from the Hive that are going to be on that roundtable. We got some awesome topics to discuss. Don't forget about the Discord. If you have not joined that, the link is in my YouTube bio. And with that being said, I hope everybody has a great Thursday night and then an awesome Friday going into this weekend. Cheers, everybody.
Birds flying high, you know how I feel. Sun in the sky, you know how I feel. Breeze drifting on by, you know how I feel. It's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new life.